Live stream has started.
All right, welcome everyone. I will call this committee of the whole meeting of Wednesday, December 13th to order. Start in a good way by acknowledging with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory, Squamish Nation, whose peoples have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding the Quellahan Bowen Island. We're here for a committee of the whole meeting today to discuss the 2024 budget, and our first item is an approval of the agenda. I'll look to the corporate officer for the introduction of any late items. Seeing none, motion to adopt the agenda. Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Morse. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
And that carries unanimously. Moving on to item 3, budget presentation 3.1, overview of the draft 2024-2028 financial plan, to our CFO, Kristen Watson.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the Mayor to the rest of Council, I'm pleased to be able to present our initial cut at the 5-year financial plan that would cover the period 2024 through 2028. We've put together a presentation for you. Most of this material, if you were present at the Finance Advisory Committee meeting, most of it is a repeat from that. We have a little bit of new information since that time to share with you today too. So I will start by sharing my screen and making sure that you're able to view the slides. Okay, great. So every financial plan is built with some underlying assumptions. This one is no different. I'll just start by going through some of those assumptions that are embedded within this financial plan throughout the financial plan. So we do anticipate that inflationary pressures will continue to stick around for some time. As such, we have provided for a salary and benefit cost of living increase to be inflated by 4% for year 1. As well as all of the other operating expenses. For the most part, we're increasing them by 4% for the first 3 years, 2024 through 2026. And then we're using 3% as an inflationary factor for 2027 and 2028. Throughout this planning period, we expect that interest rates are going to remain higher than we've seen in the last few years. So we're envisioning a 4 or 5% return on our investment. That's good for savings that we have for our investment revenue. There is some risk that we look to for an inflationary rate of 4.5%, in that we do have a fire truck loan that is we're going to be paying that for another 3 years, and that's a variable rate interest, as well as the interim borrowing that we will be doing for the capital projects in Blue Water Park and potentially for Eagle Cliff. So those will initially start out as variable rate loans before they're converted to long-term fixed rates. Additionally, we believe that all of the identified municipal contributions to the community center project will have been spent by December 31st, 2023. And we have anticipated then that we will access the Growing Communities Fund grant in order to pay for the remaining budget expenditures for the community center, which are approximately $2 million. So it's really for simplicity's sake that we make that assumption, and the expenditures shown in 2024 are equal to the revenue of $2 million. That being said, our fundraising campaign is continuing, and while we're very encouraged by the level of community support, we do still hope to fundraise the remaining budget shortfall. And what this will do, if we're successful with that endeavor, then that means that council will be able to redirect that $2 million of growing community funds to other council priorities, capital infrastructure replacement, potentially a compost project. There are other uses for that money. So if it doesn't need to be used to fund the community center, we certainly would be able to recommend projects to direct those funds to. We expect that the community center is going to be open in the spring of 2024. And for this planning period, then we are recommending a 9.5% tax increase over 2023 for 2024. And we're recommending that tax increase be in place for a period of 3 years. And what that will do will be to bring the taxable revenue, the taxation revenue, to a level that will enable us to sustain the necessary ongoing annual infrastructure investments. At that time, we believe we'll be able to level off the tax increases, and we're showing them at 4% for years 27 and 28. I have some information for you about the impact of the non-market change this year. So non-market change, it's the year-over-year change in the assessment roll that doesn't come from market influences. So it's things like the value of new construction. So new things on the roll that we didn't have on the roll last year. There are new sources of revenue for the municipality. It also happens when there's a reclassification of a property from, say, a residential class to a farm class. Or it also, in this case this year, will happen because ownership changes. So we've had several lots that went from privately owned taxable to exempt status. So the impact that we can expect this year from the value of the new construction will add about $38 million of new value to the tax roll. And that will have downward pressure on the effective impact of the tax rate increases. So if we're collecting 9.5% more, but we have more value to spread that interest, that increase upon, then effectively everybody could pay a little bit less. That's offset by the change in the ownership of the Cape Roger Curtis lots. They were held last year in private hands. And this year being owned by the regional district means that effectively $54 million of taxable property has been removed from the tax roll. So this has the opposite effect. This is going to have upward pressure on the impact, the effective impact of any tax rate changes. So what that means for us is effectively there's a net reduction to the value of the property tax roll by about $16 million of value. And so say for a property that was worth about $1.5 million, they would see a decrease in their taxes year over year. If there were no changes, they would see a decrease in their taxes of about $30, but that would be offset by an increase to their taxes of about $43 from those ownership changes. So for 2024, an average house worth $1.5 million and a 9.5% nominal increase, one could expect approximately $297 increase per property. And again, that's based on the 2023 assessments. And then add another $13 for that impact that one would experience from the non-market changes. And that becomes about a 9.93% effective tax increase. Again, these tax increases and how any individual taxpayer is going to experience them is very dependent on their own personal circumstances. So how did their property value change in relation to the overall market change in the community? That impacts how much an individual property tax payer will pay. And of course, it doesn't, what we're presenting here today doesn't include any of the changes to any local service area, parcel taxes or user rates. So that's all still to come in the next steps of the budget. I'll talk just a little bit about the revenue impacts to the budget that we're putting forth. Overall, we can see in addition to our property tax change, there's a big increase in our sale of service revenue, just almost $100,000. And that's mostly coming from our recreation department. We have budgeted $35,000 in additional recreation revenue this year, and we are expecting to plan for about $60,000 of facility rental revenue from our new community center. Our grant revenue, down significantly from the prior year. Of course, that's because the funding for the community center has assumed that we're going to spend it all in 2023. And what we've got what we can expect to receive in 2024 for grant revenue is relating again, much of it to capital projects. There's almost $400,000 in there from TransLink to work on the multi-use path. There's $450,000 of expected grant revenue that we will be recognizing with respect to the Eagle Cliff water project, the interconnection with the Cove Bay. There's about $150,000 in an operating grant that's through our emergency planning department, and that is to plan for disaster mitigation. And there is about $360,000 of grant funding from the province that we're budgeting for active transportation. So again, that would be related to the multi-use path. We're expecting very little in the way of donation revenue. We're not expecting, but we're planning for it. We're hoping for the best and we're planning for the worst. So there's nothing significant in here that we've put in the budget for donation revenue. And we're also taking a very conservative approach from our development revenues. So we noticed this year there was some decrease in development activity on the island. We expect that to continue throughout next year before it starts to gradually recover. So we are taking a conservative approach, and we do assume that development revenue will be down next year as well. Lastly, in the other income line item, the big change year over year is that we are budgeting for an increase to our investment revenue. We put in about $100,000 of additional revenue expected from investment earnings. So for operations, we are planning overall for an increase to operations expense of about 12.5% from 2023. We do have some more detailed departmental presentations on each of these kind of line items, but from a high level perspective in the legislative, the mayor and council budget line item, it looks no change year over year. There are some initial first year significant expenditures that we incur to get new council off and running for their new terms. So there's always new council orientation. There's always additional conferences and technological requirements that are needed in the first year. So when we look at the impact of any additional salary and benefit changes that were implemented in 2023, and we offset that against the anticipated savings, it looks like there's potentially no increase to the mayor council budget line item for 2024. Fire and emergency has a significant increase. That is in respect of a lot of one-time grant funded expenditures, which have an offsetting revenue up in the revenue line item. And then having a look at facility operations, that relates to the staggered opening timeline that we anticipate. We did anticipate initially opening in October of 2023. That's being pushed back to the spring. And then you'll see the full year impact of operating that facility start hitting the budget in 2025 and beyond. Impact to our statutory reserve funds. I'm showing a graph that shows a bar chart from 2023 to 2028 with statutory reserve funds set at about $4 million in 2023, contributions dropping to just over $2 million in 2024, and starting to grow evenly over the rest of the planning period from $2.7 million in 2025 up to almost $4 million in 2028. The bar chart also shows utilization of statutory reserve funds starting 2024, we're getting through a very significant period of capital investment, and the use of statutory reserve funds in 2024 is estimated to be just over $5 million, dropping down in 2025 to about $2.5 million, and gradually leveling off to a rate that we believe is sustainable and required to ensure that we can keep maintaining and replacing and renewing our capital infrastructure. So just over $2 million a year annual investment going forward, we believe is what's needed to maintain municipal infrastructure in a suitable state of repair. The next slide is a capital budget detail of our capital budget projects that we have identified for 2024 through 28. In 2024, we believe that we will be expending about almost $7 million in capital projects, a similar amount for 2025, and leveling down to just over $2 million in each of 2026 through 2028. And the impact then on our reserve funds would be to significantly deplete them. I'm looking again at a bar chart that shows at the end of 2023, we expect to have approximately $7 million combined in statutory and non-statutory reserves. It's expected with this big push to get through these capital infrastructure projects that we've identified for 2024 and 2025, that those balances will drop to around $4 million. And then as we get through them and start with our regular ongoing program of renewal and replacement, that we will be able to gradually increase the balance over the following 3 years. And hopefully by the end of the 5-year planning period, we can expect to have approximately $9 million in statutory and non-statutory reserve funds. The next slide is talking about our debt servicing costs. So together combined, principal and interest payments for 2024 are expected to be approximately $623,000. There's an expectation that they will increase in 2025 to $782,000. And that is because of the works yard that is contemplated. Within 2025, we would need to undertake additional borrowing to complete the works yard project. That will continue to increase as the full impact of $3.5 million of additional borrowing is experienced in 2026. And then it levels off for 2027 and 2028. At that time, the fire truck loan, we have 3 years remaining on our fire truck loan. So when that is wound up in 2027, we can expect some decrease there to ongoing debt service payments. Now, this is the debt service and principal that is required only to service general fund debts, island-wide debts. So any of the local service area debt for the water and sewer systems will be on top of this and will be coming forward in another next iteration of a consolidated 5-year plan. All of the debt, when we're talking about our debt servicing limitation, all of the debt, be it from general fund or from local service area fund, is factored into that calculation. And I have a schedule here showing about where we're at with current and existing debt servicing costs, how much of our liability service limit is used, and what we can expect to use should we go forward and take on those extra capital projects. So at the moment, we are sitting at about 35.6% of our liability servicing limit. Add on the new debt that's been approved, that is the Blue Water 30-year debt. We need to undertake a borrowing referendum early in the new year to authorize the Eagle Cliff debt. Potentially there's debt coming from the compost project and potential new debt from the works yard. That would put us at about 56.1% of our total liability servicing limit. And lastly, on the long-term horizon, if we are to continue with phase 2 of the Eagle Cliff project, if we're to undertake the last phase of the Blue Water project, and if there's any municipal funding of the long-term wastewater treatment plant, that too all would be coming from debt, potentially could be adding up to another $10 million of debt to the municipality's liability servicing limit. It would push us to almost 70% of our annual estimated liability servicing limit. Just wanted to bring to the attention of council, this plan that you have in front of you does not have the borrowing that would be required for the compost project at this point. This project needs consideration by council, and the funding plan for it will require a council decision on that. So I would like to turn it over, I think, to Patrick first, who has a more detailed presentation on the Public Works budget and capital projects that are planned for the next year, next 2 years, and over the longer term.
Okay. First, just to provide where's the operations budget. So the Public Works operations budget increased by about 200,000, about 16.9% from 2023 to 2024. A large chunk of that is related to the temporary, the 2-year term admin assistant position that's facilitating other staff's ability to devote more time to asset management, which is it's helping significantly in advancing that program. There's about 90,000 in staff salary and benefits cost adjustments. So some of the things that Kristen talked about, the cost of living allowance, the labor market adjustments that were made. There's some assumptions made about the increase in the cost of the union agreement, which isn't confirmed yet. The negotiations are planned for early 2024. And then there was also an increase in allowance for maintenance, repair, and materials. So getting into capital projects, the biggest one that we have planned for 2024 is replacement of the Carter Road Bridge. Design has been complete. Our preference would be to tender that project at the beginning of the year. We would expect to get better pricing than if we wait until final budget approval. So we'll be bringing that before council for approval in early in the year. We did do an updated bridge inspection in 2023 that recommended replacement proceed in 2024. The estimated cost is about 1.36 million. The Cross Island multi-use path, the next section in heading west across the island from Artisan Lane to Charlie's Lane, planned for 2024 to 2025. There were some concerns raised by geotechnical investigations that led to design revisions, essentially more of the path being along Grafton Road. It also delayed design and construction. We were only we only constructed a small section, about 80 meters past Artisan Lane, essentially to make sure we used up available grant money. This leaves the bulk of that next section to be constructed in 2024 to 2025. And so there's budget in both 2024 and 2025 for that project. A large majority of that is grant funding, but there is some funding required by the municipality as well, about 130,000 in each year. Just looking at the water main replacement project in Blue Water, that has some implications for the municipal budget because there's integrated culverts that need to be done as part of the integrated with the water main work. And in fact, the phasing is governed by what the expected cost of the culvert replacements would be. We're under budget pressures, we have to focus on completing the southeast portion of the water mains where there aren't very many culverts to be dealt with in 2024 and then deferring the northwest section of the system to 2025 when we're able to budget more for higher cost of culverts in that part of the system. The upgrading of the Bowen Bay wells and the system interconnection, which is the other part of this project, is currently on hold. It's possible it may be deferred. We're evaluating we're assessing a potentially high productivity well water that could change how we close the supply count. The other big water project planned for 2024 is the Eagle Cliff to Cove Bay connection. A large part of that is grant funded. It's also got municipal budget implications because there are culverts as well. As well as culverts, there are some hydrants, which makes sense to install along the route of the water main. There was some issues raised in our discussions with Eagle Cliff about the fairness of having them pay for those hydrants with their share of the contribution to the project. So the municipal contribution to the cost of the culverts, which is the bulk of it, and the hydrants is only about $213,000 because about 73% of that cost is grant funded. For road rehabilitations, if we look at the total cost estimate for rehabilitating all of the municipal roads, it's somewhere around $46 million. If we assume an average 35-year service life, that would lead to an annual replacement cost being around $1.3 million. Recognizing the reality of our finances, what's proposed is $500,000 for 2024, and that's increasing in $50,000 increments per year thereafter in the 5-year plan. We are also evaluating risks to basic service levels, and it may make sense to direct some of these funds towards the highest risk culverts where the risk of road failure is highest. If we see very high risk indicators materialize, such as voids appearing under the road surface and road base. So speaking of culverts, we already mentioned that there's culvert replacement work in 2024 and 2025 that is mainly related to the water main projects and the need to have those integrated. And then the rest of the 5-year plan, 2026 to 2028, there's $1 million per year for culvert replacements and rehabilitations. Looking at the overall cost for municipal culverts is about $22.4 million, and a large chunk of that, about $5.7 million, is our culverts that are in very poor condition. And in terms of the overall infrastructure risk to basic road access level of service, that's probably the highest that we have are those culverts in very poor condition. Some other priority capital projects for 2024 would be completing a slope stabilization project along Smuggler's Cove Road that was intended to be done at the end of 2023, but it's going to carry over into January. There is a failed storm pipe that runs under the library building. That's not a comfortable situation, and we would like to have that pipe sealed and reduce that risk that we're currently living with. 2 small trucks in the municipal fleet that are at the end of their life that need to be replaced. And we have some work that was originally intended for the 2024 budget, but has to be deferred to 2025 due to other budget pressures. So the Mount Gardner dock replacement, repairs to the library building structure, that's going to need some further assessment to really understand what the extent of those repairs need to be. And some rock slope stabilization work that is proposed for 2025, as well as $100,000 in subsequent years, 5-year plan as well. So that the next two highest priorities are the remaining section of Taylor Road that hasn't been addressed yet, and then there's a section along Eagle Cliff Road near Upland Trail that needs to be stabilized. There's equipment purchases that would be extremely helpful to the municipal operations that have been deferred as well. Currently, we don't have suitable equipment for sweeping and plowing the multi-use path, which we're to add more of. There is some tools that are appropriate for this and also have other useful functions. It's not cheap equipment, but it would enable us to effectively manage and maintain this new infrastructure that we're building. And then the purchase of an excavator is something that keeps getting pushed as well. It's again expanding the scope of work that our public works staff can undertake with that equipment. The 5-year plan has in 2025 and 2028 has between 150 and 200,000 per year for equipment placement and purchase. The public works service has been is deferred to 2025. A temporary trailer's been installed. There's, we did get a preliminary design build proposal from Liberty, who constructed the fire hall. And we are hoping to be able to proceed with that or an alternative delivery method in advance of constructing the facility in 2025. Of course, there's, we would need a fixed price from either Liberty or another firm to confirm what needs to be borrowed and to go through that loan authorization process. It's not as much related to the municipal budget, but it is a big project that needs to be done, and that's the replacement of the outfall, the wastewater outfall. It's a $1.2 million project that's going to require borrowing. Borrowing would have to be repaid by the service area. The service area would impact our debt and servicing limits. And we have no real understanding of what the funding plan or timing for the further wastewater treatment plant upgrades will be. A few other utility projects to mention. We have a number of PRVs, pressure reducing valves that need to be replaced, some water mains that need to be replaced, and then once the Eagle Cliff Cove Bay connection is complete, we'll need to decommission that reservoir, the surface water reservoir. Whoops. So that's it in a nutshell. If there's questions, do we get do questions as we go along, or
Probably.
Do I do questions now? I was holding them off until the end. Or sorry, until the end of
Each presentation.
Yeah, each presentation. So Councillor Morse, I see a double-sided page.
Well, Patrick's got the second page. So the 2024 MUC grant funding, I think you had 752,000 in grant funding. That's confirmed?
That's confirmed.
whereas the next year's isn't for
Yeah,
2025.
2025 isn't confirmed.
Okay, so that's a yes. The Blue Water culverts, on the map, you've got, is it easy to go, yeah, so you've got 4 culverts for 136,000, is that 136,000 each?
No total.
Okay, and then on the next side, you've got 9 culverts for 786,000, but I can only count 7 black dots on that right-hand side.
There's 9 there.
Okay, 401, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, okay, there are 2 lost in there. I didn't see, I had my reading glasses on when I was looking at it. Okay, so 4 is 136,000, but 9 is 786,000? So are those much more difficult culverts or something?
Yes, exactly. They're larger, deeper. There's significant differences in culverts can range in cost from $20,000 to $500,000.
Okay, and then my next question is, what kind of piping are you going to be using?
For the culverts,
Yes,
mostly expect they would be HDPE.
and the useful life of that is?
50 years is what we assume. You probably get more life than that, but that's, and in some cases where there's limited cover, you might use concrete. But it would be HDPE or concrete, none of them would be replaced with steel.
And none of these culverts have been replaced in the last 10 or 15 years?
No.
Okay, and we're not doing the big one that was on Windjammer before, that we did a couple of years ago?
No.
That's being left alone. So that was that question. And is there any way to recover the cost of the hydrants? I know this one came up at the finance committee. That we're gonna put in on the road. I mean, everybody's gonna get benefit in their insurance coverage is gonna go down because they're gonna be close to a hydrant. So they're gonna have a big benefit, but we're picking up the cost for that.
I'm not sure what the mechanism to recover that would be because it's, we don't know yet which properties are gonna be interested in joining the system and contributing to the project.
But joining the system doesn't matter. They're gonna be closer to the hydrant.
Yeah, so that's the thing. There'll be properties that elect not to join the system that get benefits from the hydrants, as you've said. I'm not sure how we get money from those properties.
And they're not, so some of those hydrants are not gonna be within the Eagle Cliff or the Cove Bay water system.
It will be in the combined water system.
Will they all be in the combined system? No, they won't be because for
Well, the combined system is going to be likely current Cove Bay system, current Eagle Cliff system, and then a number of properties in between.
So how do we, I guess we own the roads those lines are running on, so that's why they end up belonging to us. We're not running through anybody's properties. So do we have a bylaw where if you're not part of a water system, you have to pay for the use of the hydrant if you had a fire? Insurance companies will cover that if you have it in your bylaw and require it.
No, we don't currently.
Something we should look at. All right, that was that one. Okay, and your MUP slide, what's a multi-hog approach?
Oh, it's a piece of equipment that's it's like a small tractor that has multiple attachments that municipalities use for plowing pathways and sidewalks and sweeping pathways and sidewalks.
And so that's one piece of equipment costing 300,000.
Yeah.
And you've got a small excavator costing 150, but you're only gonna put 150 to 200 per year in the budget for acquiring new equipment. So those numbers don't work.
I think you-
300 in year one.
Highlighting things that the public works would like to have.
Okay, so if you wanted to buy the hog in year one, you're gonna have to have 300,000 in your acquisition budget, not 150.
We would, yeah. We don't have that currently.
So the other option is you put 150 into the reserve fund this year and another 150 next year, and you buy the hog in 2025.
Right.
That's the other
That's
plan.
another option.
Okay. But you're talking about 150 to 200 for 2025 to 2028. So have you got 450 in for 2024?
No, I think 2024 is just, it's just 100,000 for the trucks.
Okay, so something doesn't work in the numbers.
It doesn't work currently.
The director of engineers highlighted these things that we don't feel are manageable within the existing budget, within the 9.5. But they are things that he's identifying that would be very useful
So
for.
basically, if we wanted to buy those two pieces of equipment, that 150 to 200 is going to go up.
Correct.
Okay, that wasn't clear. All right. And then I guess my other is just with the MUP with doing that very short piece of Charlie's Lane. For the same amount of money, we could almost do the rest of the whole thing, and then we'd only have to share the road with the bikes, markings and everything for a couple of 100 meters. We get better value for a dollar, so that's my concern with the MUP, and always has been. Okay, that was my questions, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Morse. Councillor Wade?
On the last slide, you had priority. So are those ones also being deferred or hoping for?
Some of these we would plan to do in 2024. We were focusing more on the elements in the municipal budget as part of this discussion here. The utilities budgets we're still working on.
Okay.
But some of these would definitely be 2024 projects. Probably the PRV in Cove Bay at Four Corners, and the water mains. The reservoir decommissioning would probably be 2025. And as would probably the Tunstall Bay PRV.
And so how do those get funded? Do they get funded by a parcel tax or?
They, in some cases, they could be funded from reserves, and or we have projects that are beyond the ability to do with reserves, then it has to be borrowed funds and parcel tax on the surface area.
Can I ask what's an AC main? It's got something to do with concrete.
Asbestos cement.
Asbestos.
And
Councillor Getty?
can I ask, is PRV the relief valves? Is that what that is?
Those are pressure reducing valves.
Thank you.
Over to you, Councillor Getty.
Some of this appears to be a mix of what's going to be the municipal responsibilities and what are the local service area responsibilities, such as water mains, possibly wastewater treatment.
Okay.
When I go through the first slides with respect to the administrative assistant, staff salaries, maintenance, repairs, and materials, and then get into the capital projects. Have you added up what are the 2024, something that's 5.7 million overall, but, the culverts, 22.4 million overall, but the highest risk is 5.7. So is the 5.7 what we're looking at now and part of this?
5.7 is just highlighting the backlog in high-risk culverts that have to be dealt with. We don't have 5.7 million to spend in a 5-year plan. We have
So then, this is a mix of ideal conditions, ultimate expenses, local service areas, what the muni is gonna be responsible in 2024, and quite a mix of all of those ideas.
I've tried to highlight what we're actually budgeting in 2024 and 2025. And, I did get into some other costs that relate to the local service areas, as well as some perspective on asset management for culverts and road rehabilitation.
So just for
Hang on, I'm just gonna-
clarification, can I ask a clarification question to Judy's question?
One, I'm gonna let the CFO respond. She had her hand up, and then I'll go to you, Councilor Morrison.
I wanted to just directly address the 5.7 million. So beyond the Blue Water work, beyond the Eagle Cliff work, there's $5.7 million of high priority culverts that have been identified as most needing to be replaced. So in our capital budget, we're trying to address that by the $1 million of expenditure towards culverts year after year, starting in 2026, 27, 28. And we're going to continue along that to try and address that 5.7 million. We can't do it all at once, obviously.
That was my other question. There's culverts mentioned in the Blue Water Park, there's culverts mentioned in the Eagle Cliff, and parts of road rehabilitation. The funds might have to be redirected to culverts and then overall culverts, the 2.7. So are any of those repeated? You just said that the 5.7 was outside of Eagle Cliff and Blue Water.
Some of them are actually within Eagle Cliff and Blue Water. I've shown here what we've actually got budgeted for municipal funds that are going towards culverts in 2024 and 2025. Those are in Blue Water and Eagle Cliff. And then currently in the 5-year plan, there's $1 million per year in 2026 to 2028. We've got also a road rehabilitation budget, $500,000 in 2024, $550 in 2025, $600 in 2026, and so on. And my point about redirecting those funds is if you look at the risks, which we are, sometimes the risks to road failure is most present at the culvert location. And if those risk factors emerge strongly enough, then we have to consider, foregoing what we'd like to do in terms of road resurfacing in order to address those risks.
Yeah.
You still have the floor.
If we focus on the culverts and the road repairs that were required when we opened it up and resealed it, instead of any kind of cosmetic or upgrade, like when I look at Lenora, for instance, that got paved, when that was before we had started having collapsing culverts, but if that budget from roads had been spent on, if we'd known about and spent it on culverts, is that money better spent instead of looking at any kind of road resurfacing and putting the budget into one as opposed to possibly both?
Yeah, that may be the case. If we look strictly at the risks to basic level of service, that you're probably right. It would be.
And if we did just the culverts, is that sufficient, do you think, in terms of the risk levels? Either eliminated the road or put it into culverts?
Then you would have an extra 500 to 600,000 per year for 5 years. So you would come a lot closer to dealing with the backlog of very poor culverts if you were to do that, yes.
Thank you.
Councilor Getty, Councilor Morris.
It was just a clarification that the numbers we're looking at on the spreadsheets that are in the package are just to do with the general municipal fund budget, nothing to do with the water systems and nothing to do with the sewer systems. But Patrick, in his presentation, has added some information on the water and sewer. Am I right on that?
The culvert work,
Not the- I'm not talking about the
2024 and
culvert.
2025 are being done in Eagle Cliff and Blue Water Park as part of the project, but they're the municipal contribution towards that project. The roads work is municipally funded.
I understand that, but in the conversation, it was
Yes.
sounding as if some of that might be in the, we weren't separating out that we really we're just really dealing today with the general fund budget.
Correct, yeah.
Correct. Okay, now, I just did a quick ad, looking at the proposed capital expenditures, and this is on page 34 of the package we got from Finance Committee. If my arithmetic is right, that's only 4.6 million, so where does the other 1.1 come from?
4.6.
Well, you've got 804, 785, and 1 million, 1 million, and 1 million, so that adds to 4.6.
So it would either be, as Judy suggested, diverting road rehabilitation budget towards culverts, or it would be in 2029.
So the 507 hasn't been contemplated in the current budget, we're short by 1.2.
We haven't budgeted to complete all the 5.7 with it.
Oh, and I've got one more.
Go ahead.
Mount Gardner dock, is that replacing the whole dock or just part of it, or the float, or what, just exactly what's the word?
Ramp. Pier is fine.
We just replaced something not that long ago, was that the ramp?
That was the pier. It wasn't replaced, it was repaired.
Okay, well, maybe I'm thinking about 8 or 9 years ago. I thought we replaced the ramp, yeah, okay.
We can play tennis, go ahead.
You mentioned in one of the slides the reassessment of the upgrade to the Bowen Bay wells because of the new well that has potential in the Blue Water Park area. Does that have anything to do with the municipal project?
It doesn't.
Okay, it may readjust what they have to borrow, but that's within the local service area.
It shouldn't increase what they have to borrow, it may decrease.
That's their problem, for their benefit.
Well,
Okay. Thanks.
I've got one more.
Sure. Committee of the whole, you can ask as many
Well,
as you want.
this is the biggest budget too. And forgive me if I missed it somewhere. In the general fund capital projects line in this nice spreadsheet from the finance committee, it's equal culverts and fire hydrants. Did you split it out somewhere? Like how much are the fire hydrants versus the culverts?
the fire hydrants are 524,000 and the culverts are about 524,000 and the hydrants are about 140. So most of it is culverts.
Thanks.
Just looking for any questions online. I don't see any. Thank you to the Director of Engineering. I mean, the big takeaway on this, on these budget lines for me is that we're going from, and I'd like to see it, that we're going from a budget in 2023 of 780,000 on culverts and roads to doing some actual planning and some actual investments so that by the time we get to 2028, we'll start it looks like we'll start to push $2 million, which I think will at least start to defray and start to catch up on some of the infrastructure deficit that we're seeing on the island. So thank you for your work on this and your diligence. Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on to the fire chief. Chief Henry.
Fire chief is out with sickness today,
Okay.
like many people. So I am going to do my best to go through his slides and see how that goes. The operating budget for the operations for the emergency planning and fire department, there's it looks like a big jump. $232,000 of that is related to these new grant funded expenditures. So we've got $42,000 in there for a grant program called NG 911, Next Generation 911. And that's a grant for capacity building, for GIS and mapping enhancements. there's a $30,000 new training and uniform grant that is aimed at building capacity within the emergency social services organization. And there's a one significant grant for $150,000 that is that we've applied for in order to create a disaster risk mitigation plan. So those are one-time operating expenses, and again, they have an offsetting grant revenue, so they don't actually impact the tax rate. Other things in the operating fire and emergency budget include a request to add a 0.4 FTE to the fire department staffing, and that is really to support the higher call volume that they have been experiencing. They require additional hours to support the deputy assistant chief function, and that is the reason for the additional FTE ask this year. There are additional cost pressures to keep the volunteers trained sufficiently. They have regulations that need to be met. And as well, we are anticipating an additional $4,000 of utilities expenses within the operating budget. So that new fire hall is located within Cove Bay and the sewer. So like any other property, they pay water bills and they pay sewer fees on all the water usage that takes place at the fire hall. There is a request to replace the entire complement of self-contained breathing apparatus equipment. It's looking like a cost of approximately $250,000. The equipment is such that it's of an age that they can't expect to get replacement parts and things to maintain it into the future, and it's really important that that the entire fire department have the same piece of equipment so that they know how it's used in an emergency. You don't have to fumble around with it. So when that, typically fire departments, when they replace it, they don't replace it on a rolling stock average. They replace everything all at once. Turnout gear, annually we invest about $20,000 in replacement turnout gear, and there's also a new set of turnout gear required for any of the new recruits as they come on. At the fire hall, they want to complete the vintage truck shelter. We estimate a cost of between $10,000 and $15,000 to do that. The vintage truck will be stored in that shelter and displayed as a showpiece for the community and to support heritage conservation in the community. Most of that truck has been built through donated labor and materials, but there's just the last push to get it closed in and get the glass installed is going to need to require some paid labor and supplies. So there's that ask there. The fire hall, looking around the back of the facility, it just isn't, as you said, when the weather is not good, significant rain and snowfall events, they need the access for the trucks for the volunteers. And last winter, it was proved that it was very difficult to maintain the space for snow plowing and pushing the gravel around. So they are looking at doing some paving there at the fire hall next year. The fire hall the fire chief has put forth a proposal to add solar panels to the fire hall. There's a cost line item associated with that of about $70,000. This proposal anticipates that we access our climate action funds in order to pay for that. That would help offset future utilities costs. And when we see those costs going up year after year, that's a good way to reduce those ongoing operating costs. So we do have a pot of money called Climate Action Funds. There's $204,000 of available funding there, and it actually must be spent by 2025. So this was a potential project that could be a good use of that money. Again, this is something that council's going to have to weigh in on and make a decision about in accordance with some consultation on this financial plan. Other requests, not contemplated for in this budget, but things that are kind of on their radar for the future. The fire department would also potentially want to add some rainwater catchment to the fire hall. Adding heat pumps instead of the propane heater, again, as green environmental initiatives to reduce the expenditure on propane. And other potential projects, these have been identified as other potential projects that could be funded through the use of that climate action money. We have Jillian up next. If there were questions, I may be able to answer them, or else I may need to defer them to the fire chief himself to come back to council at January 8th. So I can try my best.
Thank you.
If there are any.
Questions about fire? I had one, but it escaped me. Are you able to cycle back through a couple of slides?
Yeah,
A little
sure.
spark again? And
Climate action, use of climate action.
previous, it was an earlier slide.
Equipment replacement.
Previous to that one.
FTE.
Oh, yes. So the only request I would have with respect to the justification of the FTE, if it's possible to have, I know that we get statistics of call volume probably monthly, but it would be nice to see how they compare historically.
Okay.
So that we're able to see, so that council's able to see that increase in call volume and where it's coming from and what categories of calls.
Sure.
Thank you. Councillor Fast.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks everybody. I'm wondering about the solar on the roof and the heat pump. Would those both be calling on the same climate action funds that potentially the compost facility would draw on?
In this financial plan, there is 70,000 of climate action funds dedicated to these small energy efficiency initiatives. They're in the capital plan. So the compost project doesn't contemplate use of any of the climate action funding at this point. The climate action funding within this plan is dedicated to these smaller initiatives, plus the municipal contribution to the multi-use path. The compost funds, the compost project, it will reduce an amount of borrowing required, but it won't completely cover the municipal contribution to the compost project. So we've taken it out of that and considered if it is gonna go forward, then it will be funded through financing, through the municipal finance equipment financing program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. Councillor Morse.
I remembered one too. So looking at the new fire truck, which I have no problem with being acquired, but to me, we amortize the equipment every year, so current taxpayers should be paying for that amortization. But if that accumulated amortization is only 700,000 and there's an extra 300,000 to buy the truck, I'm not sure why current users should be paying for the benefits of future users with that new fire truck, and why we wouldn't finance part of it through the 5-year equipment borrowing. And that's sort of a general philosophy discussion I think we need to have. That reminded me, is there more funding with climate action than just the first couple of years?
We don't know. I'm making an assumption that there will be continued funding, but it is, the current program does expire at the end of 2024.
So we don't know what's gonna happen for.
We don't know what the replacement, if there will be a replacement for that.
And it replaced something else, didn't it?
A smaller amount?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We are showing it in the 5-year plan that it will continue, but we're just anticipating that we would contribute that to the reserve. We don't want to plan to spend it if we aren't 100% certain at this point if it's going to continue.
And if it did continue, can it be used for pay off borrowing to acquire climate action related assets?
I suppose it would come with new grant conditions, new program conditions, and we'd have to wait until we saw that. No.
So we probably wouldn't get it with the new money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morse. Councillor Getty.
At the very beginning, you were talking about various grants, the 42,000 30,000 for training and uniforms. Is that what we're hoping to receive? We've applied for it and we don't yet have it?
Correct.
Okay, so if we get, and those are the amounts that we've applied for.
Yeah.
All right, so if we get those, then the later comments the next slide was talking about $10,000 for training, and let's see. I guess I can't remember what the first grant was, 42,000, but are some of these other items then taken care of if we receive those grants?
No, these are very program specific. So there is 42,000 grant revenue and there's a plan on how that $42,000 would be spent. And it's very specific to, increasing the capacity of the GIS system. So address location on our system.
And the municipal contributions to any of those grants?
No, there's not. So that's straight revenue in and straight expenditure out.
And the 204,000
Yep.
Climate Action Fund
Yep.
must be spent in 2025. So if they all went to the fire hall, for the sake of argument, then the solar panels and potentially the rainwater catchment and the heat pumps, if they were all $30,000 or $70,000, that could be that could use up that fund.
We could find ways to spend it. There's a $10,000 potential for a bike shed at the community center. We could allocate that funding to that. We could identify small incremental projects that would have, immediate benefit that we could allocate to use that $204,000.
Okay. And are there other local funding like the community center or the Knick-Knack Nook in terms of helping with some of those? They for ecological programs?
Yeah, there could potentially. I'm not aware that of any that I could identify for you off the top of my head, but certainly we continue to monitor local sources as well as other sources from UBC and grant programs.
Good, thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Getty. Don't see any further questions.
So that takes us to recreation. I believe Jillian's online.
I'm here. Excuse me.
Hi, Jillian. We can see you and hear you.
Great, thank you. I apologize if I'm coughing and because I'm also sick and at home, so it's running
Jillian.
through the offices.
Jillian, would you mind just letting me know when you'd like me to advance the slide for you, please?
Sure, thanks. So for 2024, there should be no surprises coming from me today that our department is continuing to focus on growing and diversifying the programming and activities and events for the community as we move into the community center and then, take a strong role in the rental operations and management of that with the expanded capacity in the center. So Kristen showed a slide earlier showing the increase in the sale of service revenue. And I just wanted to pull out a section within that. Oh, sorry, yeah. That this is really just about the fees for programming. So we've had a steady increase, well recovered from the COVID years, and we anticipate that to continue to rise. Kristen, if you want to. Yeah. And unsurprisingly, increasing the amount of programming and events that we do has correlated expenses. So all of our operational budget expenses are directly related to expanding these programs and operations. So as you can see, it's written here that increase in instructor fees. We currently have over 30 instructors in the community that are engaged with us, and that's part of our expenditures here. A lot of supplies, and the more you sell through ActiveNet, for example, the more fees that they take from you, and as does the bank. So all of that increases. I've mentioned here specifically the expanded off-island excursion for kids because these are immensely popular. Taking our island kids off island on the bus, on the trains, out to climbing walls and escape rooms and making pastries and all kinds of exciting things, biking around Stanley Park, all of these types of activities are so valuable for them in a lot of ways, not just getting off the island, but learning actually how to be safe out in the city in public transit and things like that. So there's additional small amounts of additional expenses there for things like replacing some of the small equipment that we use in the weight room and fitness studio. A lot of equipment has not been replaced in a very long time, so we need some of that. And we're trying to do more free community events like at Family Day and the Fall Family Dinner and Games Night, but then we do also seek grants and donations to support those. Capital expenditures, unsurprisingly, it's mostly related to the community center. So there is 200,000 earmarked for some of those perhaps unanticipated expenses that we will find related to starting up. I think there's a lot of things we're going to find that we just hadn't really thought about, and a lot of equipment and storage mechanisms and all kinds of things to make that happen. We do need to expand the ActiveNet software in order to accommodate the room bookings, and there is a specific module for that within it. The bike shed, Kristen also just mentioned, this is a project that would be in collaboration with West Van Secondary School to create that bike shed at the community center to provide spaces for e-bikes and other bikes to get there. And the one activity listed here that's not community center related is the renovation of the space above the library to create a new dedicated space for the youth in that location that's really quite ideal for them. And we really can anticipate a revitalized program associated with that, because there's been a lot of challenges over the years in sharing space with toddlers. And we really see that as a really important driver to re-energize that whole program. That's all I have, because as I say, it's all focused around programming and community center for the most part for next year.
Any questions for the manager of recreation, Councillor Morse?
Your first slide said the additional amount of revenue you were anticipating, but I don't have the slides on my iPad, so I can't go back and look at that. Can you roll back to that first slide? Jillian's first slide.
Sorry, I tried to pause share so we can see
Or can Jillian remember off the top of her head?
I think it's 35,000.
Okay, so you've got 35,000 in additional fee revenue and 47,000 in additional program expenditures.
Yeah.
And so how do you calculate program expenditures?
There's also what isn't in this fee revenue is all of that sale of service and the rentals and all the other aspects of in the community center that our department will be responsible for as well. So some of that additional cost is associated with managing that and not just directly bringing in fees.
Okay, I misunderstood your comment. I thought the 31,000 was largely fee revenue increases. Okay, so then going back, we've got a policy that says that recreation programming is supposed to recover 100% of its direct costs. So that's why I was asking that question. So do you have stats on enrollment programs that were offered, what kind of revenue was received versus the direct costs for operating those programs?
We do. We have all of that. And in our program development process, we have a budgeting spreadsheet that we use to incorporate all of those costs in order to determine what the fee is for that program, so that nothing can run at a loss when we do it this way.
Okay, and you can't rattle it off right now, but can you share with us what you consider direct costs at some point in this process? And I guess the other sort of question is, like if a program can accommodate 10 people, what do you use as a cutoff level to ensure that you've got enough people registered to cover the costs?
That is calculated per program because it always differs. Some of the
Yeah.
programs, they'll have supply expenses and others will not. And within the instructor payment models for all the different programs, there are slightly different models at play because most of our instructors are paid on a split, so a 70-30% split. So once all of the expenses are incorporated, including taxes are taken out and active net fees taken out, then that net revenue is split with the instructor, 70% going to the instructor, 30% to the municipality, which then by basis of that model alone, you can't run at a loss, even no matter what the numbers are, and it's a shared risk with the instructor. In terms
It's a
of,
split of the net program.
yeah.
Net program profit, net profit.
So we do work together with the instructors also to identify, what is their minimum that perhaps they'd like to take away and what are they willing to run a class for? If there's, for example, only 4 registered and it's not a huge amount of money to them, are they still willing to do it knowing that we have drop-ins come all the time and things like that? So we build out each individual program so it's not at a net loss.
So right now, we're renting space for the programs. Is that rental cost for the space being factored in as program cost?
It is not currently. It's an overhead cost. It's not directly tied to the individual class, and that is something that if council wishes to modify that and look at what those direct costs are again and how we incorporate all of them, that's something we can do.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Morris, Councillor Getty.
The first slide there is talking about revenue forecast, and between the 203,000 and the 235,000 in 23-24. The next slide talks about operating budget, and it's 735 and 780,000. So I'm looking at I've written all this down and I'm looking at it. So the revenue is 235 estimated for 2024, and the operating is 780.
Sorry, that revenue slide was just about fees. It doesn't show things like donations and grants as well. Nor does it show revenue generated from rentals, for example, in the new space.
And that is part of the recreation income?
It was represented that way in an earlier slide that Kristen was showing with that the sale of service increase in revenue. And our team will be largely responsible for a lot of that.
That's in the general operating budget as income for general revenue.
It's in sale of service line item?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have a breakdown of that sales and service item,
Uh,
line item? Not just from recreation, because it includes.
you don't have one, no. We just display it as a consolidated line item, sale of service.
Is it easy to get?
Yeah, I can get it.
Back to Councillor Getty, still on the floor.
In the capital expenditures, you're talking about for the community center, a software program for 10,000, and then unanticipated costs, including software for room bookings for the facility manager. Are those the same?
Sorry, yes, that shouldn't have been there as unanticipated. It's very much anticipated that we need to do that one. I just want to say, actually, in the slide with the revenue, we chose to use the year-to-date dollar amount, but actually the budgeted amount for 2023 was lower than that, if I recall right. Kristen, do you have that in front of you?
It was 200, so this is actual revenue to about November 15th.
There's still about a $500,000 difference between revenue and operating.
Yeah. Oh, but the sale of service is several other several other things besides,
Yeah.
at least it's moorage down at Snook Cove Wharf. It's the things out in Mannion Bay. It's when we've presented it in the budget, it's a big solid rolled up number. We have not provided you a departmental budget for recreational revenue plus recreational costs. We have not provided you that. If council wants to see that, we can come up with a schedule to provide a departmental analysis of it.
Okay. The, with respect to software, I'm sorry, was that? Did you reply to that? I'm not sure that I heard that. Is that the same, the 10,000 for the community center startup costs and then later an unanticipated cost for the facility manager software for room bookings? I understood those were.
Sorry, Kristen, could you advance the slide to that?
Towards the very end. There.
Right, so these were not listing all, these were not just additional unanticipated moving. That was the first line, and the second bullet applies to the second line and so forth. So the third bullet was about the bike shed.
So the 10 is not part of the 200.
The 10,000 at the top, Bowen Island Community Center registration software, right? And is that just for booking classes?
That is the quote that we have received from ActiveNet for the new facility manager module to add to our software and for them to manage the startup of that for us and build that.
So then below the chart, then the bullet that says new facility manager software for room bookings in Bowen Island Community Center, that's the same as the 10,000? Or is that
Yeah,
in
so
addition?
it's the same. That's explaining what those line items are. Each bullet pertains to one of the line items.
Oh, got it. Okay.
I see our CAO's had his hand up for a while, so I'll go over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make a general comment too about the Recreation Department and that financial policy around fees will recover, minimum of 100% of direct costs. And I know we have this discussion almost every budget year, time of budget every year. But I just want to be really clear that I think it might be worth spending some time revisiting that policy to get absolute clarity on what council's desire is around that policy, because there is also an overarching consideration that all of the recreation programs are provided to the community with accessibility in mind, and that the programming that is offered is accessible and affordable. And so it's not going to be competitive with like private sector programming from that perspective. But the idea is that it will be able to meet the needs of those who couldn't otherwise afford the private sector level of service. And so then embedded in that are a lot of indirect costs of running the programs. And there's a lot of programming, like we just did Light Up Bowen, for example, where there's no revenue generation whatsoever. Canada Day, all of the stat holidays where recreation staff are out there on a stat holiday providing service and programming to the community where there's no revenue. So that's why you'll see a significant difference between the cost of running the department versus the revenue generation. There's a lot of programming that will never generate revenue. And then the programs that do generate revenue are offered at the lowest reasonable cost to ensure accessibility.
There is a bursary program, I understand, to help with the accessibility and availability to all programming. And there is definitions of direct and indirect costs. And so direct costs would be the supplies, the programmers' fees, and the use of the bus, for example, for taking the kids over, off island and the ferry fares, that kind of thing. Those are direct costs. The indirect costs are your general overhead programming, Jillian's time and so forth. And all of your free things aren't considered, they're not a program per se where you're paying to, they're different.
And that's exactly the same definitions that we're using when we're putting those expenses in our spreadsheet for each program.
Yeah, it's just sometimes the general public doesn't understand, and non-accountants don't understand what's direct and indirect costs. And I know there has been a lot of comments over the years about the difference between what's shown as expenses for the recreation program and what's shown as revenue.
Sometimes we understand and we just want to comment.
Fair enough. Yeah. Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome. Okay, moving on to the most exciting department of the municipality. Over to our corporate officer, Sophie Itzinga, for corporate services. It's the coolest department too, isn't it?
Yes, thank you. So the administration department manages the budget for mayor and council administration, AKA corporate services and general government. So as Kristen, our CFO, had mentioned, there's very little change in 2024 to the overall mayor and council budget, and that is because the provision for wage and benefit adjustments are offset by reduced council orientation costs and convention budgets. In administration, there is an increase of 23.4% in 2024, and that's mostly due to a budgeted increase to professional fees such as legal fees and insurance, et cetera. We have a provision in the operating budget for $20,000 for a consulting expense for records management. We've never, as far as I know, in the municipality's history, spent money on records management, so we have to start somewhere. And I'm hopeful that will be in 2024, hiring a consultant to give us some idea of how to implement and carry out a records management program for the municipality. We do have an incumbent returning from leave, so that will increase our salaries in administration a little bit. And then in general government, which is kind of like the municipal hall budget, we're going to see a reduction in 2024, mostly due to the decreased rent that we'll be paying. So for a portion of the year, after we move out from municipal hall and the other various facilities we're offering programming from and move into the community center, we'll have less rent to pay. So there's a decrease there.
That's offset by an increase in debt payments.
Yes. And then for capital projects, we have in administration, we're quite measly compared to the other departments' capital projects, but we do have some, and those are IT replacement. We are due to replace our server next year, so that's quite a large expense. It's about $25,000, as well as the licensing fees for our servers. So that's included in that one-time capital expense for 2024. And phase 3 of our website upgrades, which will be to add the online payments. So as you recall, last year we spent $15,000 on upgrading our website to the WordPress platform. This year we've spent $15,000 on creating a public engagement platform that should be launching soon. And next year we hope to do the final upgrades, and that would be to add e-commerce options. But this is what's great about a WordPress website is it's really scalable and you can add on to it anytime. So we've done those website upgrades phased over 3 years. That's it.
Great. Councilor Morris?
You said license fees for the server?
Yes.
Are they annual fees?
No, one time.
Oh, that's interesting. Everybody else is going to annual.
For our things like our software licensing itself for like Microsoft Office 365, those are annual fees, so software licensing, but the server licensing fees are a 5-year. So it's a one-time cost upfront for a 5-year period.
So it's probably a prepaid expense then.
Yeah.
So it is, we will see it annually.
Seeing no other questions, thank you.
Thank you.
It's too easy.
Moving on to planning and development.
So thank you, Mayor. Talking about the planning department budget and a couple other pieces. So starting planning department revenue, we are forecasting a reduction in revenue from development revenue. So about a $25,000 reduction in 2024 from 2023. And that's based on slower applications we've seen in the second half of 2024. We've seen building permit applications and subsequently revenue decline quite a bit. We've seen a number of projects cancel based on increased interest rates, increased construction costs. So we see that to continue. So just looking historically, this is just the building permit revenue, not the overall total development revenue, but you can see the fluctuations. So quite a steep increase 2021, 2022, and then this year at a lower rates. We forecast that lower rate going forward. And then in terms of operations, we see about $11,000 increase in the 2024 budget to 2023. The main driver is not listed here, but the COLA increase in general staffing. So the planning department operations budget is primarily a personnel, so salary and benefits budget, and so that does drive a cost increase. We are looking to reduce the time for the planning clerk position to a 0.7 FTE. So our planning clerk looking to move to a more reduced hours position, and that coincides nicely with lower activity in especially the building permit program. So able to adjust that staff position to reduce costs in line with our lower activity. The budget does see increased funding in the strategic initiatives portion. So that's associated with anticipated costs for delivering the strategic initiatives. And then we have funding for our phase 2 of our e-permitting program. So that would be to cover development permits and other development applications. And then not in the planning department budget, but in the overall budget, there is included 2 provisions for council strategic initiatives. So one of that is a MRDT funding. So that's budget to seek a consultant to implement the MRDT tax. So that's being proposed as a way to deliver council strategic initiatives within the department resources. And the second one being $100,000 funding for the OCP project. And then further funding would be anticipated to be needed in 2025 to complete that project. So that's the end of what I have to present, and I'm open for questions.
Councilor Morris.
So the OCP is 100, how much do you think it might be additionally in 2025?
I think we put 50,000 in
We're looking at
40,000.
We put 40 in 2025.
We're looking at 140,000, okay. And we've got a schedule at some point when we started out with a whole list of, I was going through my binder the other day, of projects, policy and planning initiatives, and there was a whole bunch that were not started or in progress. We got a whole bunch not started that there's no funding for either in this budget?
We have an additional provision of unallocated staffing funding, either consulting or staffing in the planning budget for 2024 of $20,000. And we're also waiting to hear more information about some potential grant funding coming at the provincial level to help some of these municipalities with the transitions coming forth from the new legislation. So we are hopeful that that we'll be in receipt of some of that grant funding too. So we look to that as potentially another source of funding to help offset the additional costs from all of these initiatives.
Could that be used for the additional costs because we're the OCP? Or is it for the other things like upgrading the housing needs assessment and land use bylaw amendments?
Yeah, I mean, the province hasn't given details on it, but I anticipate that some of it would either be things like the housing needs report is almost a precursor to the OCP. So, you know, it wouldn't directly be, it would be supporting that overall project.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morse. Seeing no further questions, thank you, Mr. Martin.
I am going to step in to help explain our environment and parks planning budget. Part of that is also out sick today.
Wow, everybody's that sick. Must have been some kind of event last week.
So in the operational budget, includes some additional money for ongoing field maintenance costs that we believe we've probably not added enough for the supply side of that. So we've added a new provision for $100 annually for field maintenance. And going forward with that field maintenance, we need to negotiate a new contract to maintain both grass field, turf field, and some of that work is going to be undertaken in-house, and some of the more complex turf maintenance activities are going to continue to be contracted out. So we've anticipated that we're actually gonna have some cost savings on the maintenance side, labor side, additional costs on the supply side. Environment and parks planning, there's some significant projects planned in the budget this year for Headwaters Park. The boards are needed to be replaced, so I believe that there's been some quotes provided for that work. So we have provisioned $100,000 expenditure for the Headwaters Park boardwalk this year. There are upgrades and replacements planned for the Maggie's Walk bridges around the golf course. There's $45,000 earmarked for those projects. Replacement of garbage receptacles and proper recycling can receptacles for Snug Cove. We have estimated throughout the cove and at the entrance to and down by the beaches, sorry. So we have included that at a cost of approximately $19,000. And through the parks plan, there's been a recommendation to install 2 new pit toilets. So the first of those has been identified to go at the Art Renison Nature Park. So that's up at Grafton Lake. So we've budgeted $25,000 for that. Ongoing in our kind of ongoing annual investment needed to renew aging park, trail, and beach infrastructure, we've identified $150,000 per year. Some of the projects that we have identified that should be replaced within the life of this 5-year plan are the staircase to Clipper Beach, down to Scarborough Beach, the Kate's Hill Stairs at coming down from Elrond's Court to Seaview Place, and as well some upgrade work on the stairs from Village Drive to Municipal Hall. As well, the parks plan does identify an annual investment needed to mitigate the impacts of climate impacts to our shoreline and undertake approximately $30,000 each year in shoreline protection work. Of course, there's the compost facility. We've got the latest iteration of the capital construction budget for the compost facility. We do have a significant amount of grant funding approved in order to support this program. So the grant does require that we have this project up and running operational by March 31st of next year, of 2025. So the plan, if council does agree to move forward with this project, The plan is that a project manager will be engaged early in 2024 and work on the development and further refining of the operating plan, and will begin work on site prep and construction of the facility. So the compost project, the budget there is approximately $1.6 million. There's grant funding of about $1 million. There's the Knick-Knack Nook contribution of approximately $100,000. So that puts the municipal contribution at about $460,000. So that's something that's not currently included in this budget. There needs to be a choice if it's to go forward, that the choice to fund it comes any of our potential sources being equipment financing through the MFA. This project was selected as one to be financed because the different components of it are equipment related, as opposed to say the multi-use path where it's construction of new roadways. There's no quick 5-year financing programs that we could access that don't require elector assent. So if there is financing to be used to take on any of these significant capital projects, this is the one that the financing should be attached to because of its eligibility for use through equipment financing program through MFA. It's 5-year financing, it has to be repaid within 5 years, and it's all floating rate interest. So the borrowing, to undertake that would not require elector assent, and it could be financed through that program. The repayment, one could expect to repay approximately $117,000 per year of interest and principal. And if looking at based on last year's tax rate, last year's assessment base, a homeowner with a property worth approximately $1.5 million could expect to pay approximately $60 per year for 5 years in order to repay that $460,000 in financing debt required. And of course, the project is expected to have a positive cash flow once this debt has been repaid. So the financial plan development process still to come. We do need to hear from the library. There, in this financial plan, we have put forth a provision for about a 7% annual increase. We do, as the Director of Engineering mentioned, we are embarking on our collective agreement negotiations with our outside workers. We are undertaking a benefit review. We have provided for a 10% increase in the cost of our salary, health and extended health benefits. So we are hoping to see if we can create some efficiencies or some savings on the cost of our benefits. The community center facility management budget has not been reviewed yet by our new facilities manager, so I'm hoping to engage with him on taking a deep dive at that to make sure that we've captured all of the aspects that we can consider for having to spend money on when we're in there and operating. I'm looking forward to his input and advice on that. We will be developing our water and sewer budgets over the next 4 to 6 weeks, and we expect to have those wrapped up by the end of January. Their Director of Engineering mentioned there is a sewer outfall project and Cove Bay interconnection project. Both of those projects require new debt with an elector approval process behind them. They won't have any impact to the general fund or the property tax rate, but it is a significant cost that people in those local service areas are going to have to consider on top of the municipal tax rate increase. And also, of course, we're going to be undertaking a public engagement process. And that is expected to take place between January 9th and 31st. So along the timeline here, we're here at the very beginning, December 13th, with a committee of the whole presentation to council. We need to go through the development of the local service area budgets. We will undertake public consultation and get the results of that public consultation back to council by mid-February. We will come back to council with a revised second draft of this budget with included, it'll be a consolidated version with all of the local area services budgets in there. We expect to come back to council with that by the end of February. We expect we will take that back to the finance committee in the month of March, and we'll have an amended budget bylaw to council by the April 8th council meeting, where we would expect to go for 3 meetings and reconsideration final adoption by April 22nd of this year. The statutory deadline is May 15th, so we believe that we'll be well in advance of that deadline. And with that, we can take some more questions or comments.
Councillor Saunders.
Thanks. I'm wondering if I could get the CFO to go back into the dawn of time here to her very first slide with revenues. There's a couple of questions I had about that.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. So I'm looking at the difference in the grant revenue year-to-date actual and the budget. So a $6 million difference, which is obviously fairly significant. Is that just because stuff comes in at the very end of the year, like in the last 2 weeks of the year, or is there actually $6 million that isn't going to come in?
No, it's all going to come in. I really bundle up all of the costs and spend them. And then I wait until year end before I make those actual funding entries where I recognize the grant revenue in order to make sure that all of the capital projects require a specific municipal contribution and a specific provincial contribution, a specific federal government contribution. So rather than making assumptions and then going back and correcting, it's much easier for me to wait until the year is done and make that entry all at once. So it's really just a timing thing from an accounting perspective that you don't see that grant revenue.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thanks. And just a second question, if I could, it was on your first, I think the next, the expense at the first, there you go. So there was no, it might not have been this one. It seems to me at some point you noted that there was we're going to use the Growing Community Fund, $2 million going to the community center. Is that, if I heard that properly? And if that's the case, is that a done deal? And what's the effect if we don't use that Growing Community Fund for that?
That is the assumption I've made. That needs to be confirmed and approved by council. At this point, we still do have this unfunded $2 million gap to finish the community center. So in light of not having any confirmed donation revenue to fill that gap, it's going to be one of Growing Communities Fund, it's going to be property tax revenue, additional property tax revenue, or it's going to be additional borrowing. I've the best of 3 terrible choices and put in the use of the Growing Communities Fund.
Okay, thanks for that.
Councillor Morse.
Can we go back to the parts sales slide?
Sure.
And ask us for questions there.
Great. Which one, Councillor Morse?
Well, the Maggie's, which, if my recollection is correct, there's a fund at the Bowen Island Community Foundation. That was a legacy fund set up, and we can tap into that for some parts, for some trails funding and stuff. So have we done that?
The manager of Parks and Environment mentioned that to me, and she did indicate that she would make inquiry to the foundation about any potential additional funding. I've taken a conservative approach and assumed nothing. Councillor Pass may have more additional information about that.
Yeah, I know they've got a small outside advisory committee that recommends, and I'm looking at the fact that, you know, there seems to be some two things, the bridges and the boardwalk that could be. And then I guess that's just a clarification when we've got the manager of planning here. The Art Renaissance land, my understanding is it's a nature reserve, not a park. It wasn't dedicated at the time of subdivision as a park. It's a nature reserve. There's a big difference in what you can do with a park versus land that isn't designated park at the time of subdivision.
Through the mayor, it's taken as fee simple land as with many of our parks, they operate as parks, but our owned as fee simple parcels.
So it was dedicated as a park then at the time of subdivision.
No, it was created as a fee simple parcel that the municipality owns.
So, and I thought it was to be under the rezoning to be called the Art Renaissance Nature Reserve.
Through the rezoning of the subdivision, it's Art Renaissance Nature Park rather than.
I just thought that was one of the conditions we had sort of agreed to back in the beginning, that it would be called the Art Renaissance Nature Reserve.
Through discussions as the park was being created, as the lot was being created and transferred, the applicant and the then manager of parks determined that the park name was better than the reserve name.
And the slide about the numbers for the, stop on that stairwell one. This is just a practical thing that I noted when we were sitting in the Fairyland. Wood stairs tend to get slimy and slippery because they don't get a lot of rain and stuff on them, or, if they're in the shade. Is there any thought to putting metal grading strips on those stairs so people don't slide when they're walking up and down them? Because it's a safety concern.
Yeah, that's something that we should be looking at.
Yeah. The railings are hard to grab on, being the size of them. So the next slide is the next one. Okay, if you've got $1.6 million project and 1.1 million in contributions, I'm not quite sure how you get 460. I think it should be 560. Or 500 that we. But I added without my calculator, I used my head. Just the budget thing we were looking at the finance committee had something like 523 shortfall. So I was thinking it was more like a 500 borrowing on it.
Yeah, the latest iteration that we were given was $460,000 in debt.
So the numbers have changed from what we got at the finance committee.
I just, I made this slide this morning and I think I have my best recollection, but before a decision's made, council's going to have to review the final price, the final operating budget, and look at the opportunity cost of what all potential municipal funding sources could be for this project. So we'll speak with the manager of Parks and Environment, and we will identify which council meeting, likely January 8th or the second one in January, because I think, as we heard at the council meeting earlier this month, a decision by council needs to be made in advance of budget approval. So
thank you.
So we'll have a final project cost for you at that time.
Thanks.
Any further questions? Seeing none. We are on to item 3.3, capital project financing options. Next steps.
Sorry, I think.
Are we still on the?
No, I think this is, I kind of wrapped up and addressed that last point in the rest of this presentation. So
I thought I saw Alex's hand.
Allison or Alex?
Alex. Councilor Jurgensen, is there anything you'd like to add? Okay. And then any last questions and answers before we adjourn? Then I will look for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Morse. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And